Hey there, welcome to the channel. My name is James, and here at 20th and 21st Movies, we are about all things cinema. All right, today I'm going to come on here and share with you my thoughts on a recent release from the Criterion Collection on 4K Ultra HD. This is a title from 1984, and it's the introduction to me of Alan Rudolph's work. I've never seen any films from this director, so I love getting introduced to new filmmakers from around the world and just learning about filmmakers that I had never heard of before or never seen their work. And so the 1984 film Choose Me from director Alan Rudolph was an interesting discovery for me. This is a film that stars Geneviève Bujold, Keith Carradine, and Lesley Ann Warren in a really cool romantic comedy drama that takes place in 1980s Los Angeles. It's a very interesting story, and I want to come on here and just share what I think about this film. I really like the cast of this movie between Bujold, Carradine, Lesley Ann Warren. It also has Rae Dawn Chong in here, John Larroquette in here. So you've got a pretty nice cast in this movie. I think the premise is very interesting, so gonna get into that in just a moment here. So I'll talk about the movie, I'll talk about the picture quality, how it looks on 4K Ultra HD. This is a 4K picture with Dolby Vision, so we'll talk about how that looks. And then we'll talk about the audio and the supplements and whether or not as a package is Choose Me worth picking up and adding to your collection. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and talk about it. All right, we're talking about the 1984 film Choose Me from Alan Rudolph that is now a part of the Criterion Collection. And I'm really excited to talk about this title. When this title was first announced, I was really intrigued and pulled into this title when I heard that it was based on a song from Teddy Pendergrass, and that the Teddy Pendergrass's music was part of the soundtrack of this movie. So was definitely pulled in based upon that. But yeah, this film, Choose Me, is the defining film of Alan Rudolph's career. So Rudolph is a protege of Robert Altman. He took Robert Altman's freewheeling, overlapping dialogue style that you see in so many of his movies, and he was able to take that style and infuse it with a more intimate and romantic and almost surreal or dreamy quality. And so you'll see some of his other films like Trouble in Mind and The Moderns. They tend to exist in a heightened reality where characters seem to move through life as if they're part of a jazz melody. So this film itself, Choose Me, is in particular a love letter to lonely souls searching for connection in a world of neon lights, smoky bars, and late night radio confessions. It's a film that doesn't play by conventional narrative rules. It's all mood, feeling, and fleeting moments of desire and regret. It's also a film that helped define 1980s American independent cinema, proving that smaller budget films could be as stylish and engaging as Hollywood's biggest productions. When I started watching it, I was pretty amazed by the atmosphere, just the sultry atmosphere that was set up in terms of the time in Eve's Lounge, where you've got Keith Carradine in there just being a cool customer, checking out Lesley Ann Warren, the bartender, John Larroquette, also having a thing for Lesley Ann Warren, and just seeing that whole dynamic play out. You also have Rae Dawn Chong in the lounge as well. And it's just a very steamy, sultry atmosphere that is built up in the lounge, and then it sort of manifests itself outside of the lounge in different ways. And it's just a really interesting romantic comedy drama type film, seeing the dynamics of these characters together. You also have Geneviève Bujold, who plays Dr. Nancy Love, who runs a radio show. And so she's receiving calls from the Lonely Hearts Club out there in the radio waves and radio land. People calling in, asking her questions, talking about their luck or lack thereof with pursuing relationships. And she's giving her sagely doctorly advice, but at the same time, not exactly experiencing a lot of success of her own in the area of love. And that's all part of the dynamic as well in terms of her personal journey, being someone giving out all this love advice to people, but experiencing very little personal fulfillment of her own. So I thought that was interesting. But let me bring up the Teddy Pendergrass slide. Teddy Pendergrass, his song, You're My Choice Tonight, which has a really cool rhythm. If you are not familiar with this song, definitely pull it up on your Spotify, your Apple Music, or whatever app or a service you use. This is a really cool song. Plays in the beginning when this movie opens up, really sets the mood for this story. It's You're My Choice Tonight, Choose Me, inspired, of course, the title of the film, and it really inspired this movie. Alan Rudolph was, I think, the first inspiration was to do a music video for Teddy Pendergrass based on some work between Teddy Pendergrass and Luther Vandross. And Alan Rudolph had another idea. He said, "What? Let me just make a whole motion picture out of this song and use a similar budget, I think $640,000, and make this movie." And that's what they did. And it turned out to be a pretty good success. So I really like that choice indeed. But this slide here on Teddy Pendergrass shows the artist. If you're not familiar with his music, he was a legendary soul singer. He lived from 1950 to 2010. He established a fantastic solo career after leaving the Blue Notes in 1975, after he released his self-titled solo debut. He did 5 consecutive platinum albums, very successful musician. You see a picture of him to the right, Pendergrass in 2000. One very notable aspect of his life, of course, was the tragic accident he had in 1982, where he was left partially paralyzed from the chest down. And after recovering from that accident, he was still able to continue his career and put out some great music. But there was sort of that period before the accident, Teddy Pendergrass, and the period afterwards that is very something to keep in mind. But yeah, Teddy Pendergrass's song, You're My Choice Tonight, inspired this film. Now, more on director Alan Rudolph. He was a mentor of Robert Altman, and through Altman began working with Keith Carradine on other projects. So this is a picture of Alan Rudolph and Robert Altman. He had worked with Robert Altman on some projects. Robert Altman was a mentor to him, and he was able to sort of take what he learned from Robert Altman and put his own spin on it. He made other movies such as Trouble in Mind and The Moderns. Trouble in Mind starred Chris Christopherson, Keith Carradine, and also Geneviève Bujold, who both appeared in this film, Choose Me. And then The Moderns, which also starred Keith Carradine. So you'll see at the top right, Alan Rudolph and Keith Carradine, that they were a longtime collaborative couple there in terms of working together on multiple films. They worked on 6 films together. So very much like other big time collaborations between directors and actors, this was a long time collaboration that these two worked together on multiple projects. So very good stuff. And that was part of the inspiration from Altman as well, because Keith Carradine worked with Altman on some stuff, got the attention of Alan Rudolph, and Alan Rudolph recruited him to work with him on multiple projects as well. So let me take a moment here to read the back of this case here. Choose Me, an achingly romantic neon dream, Alan Rudolph's comic and cutting exploration of the mysteries of human desire established him as one of the most boldly idiosyncratic independent auteurs of the 1980s. At the Smoky Dive, Eve's Lounge, a collection of strangers, including an insecure radio sexpert, Geneviève Bujold, a commitment-phobic former sex worker, Lesley Ann Warren. She said in the movie that she didn't want to get married because she had ruined so many marriages, which is one of the best lines from the film. And a globe-trotting mystery man, Keith Carradine, became entangled in a web of passion, jealousy, and self-discovery. grooving to the rhythms of Teddy Pendergrass's sexy slow jams. Choose Me exists on its own offbeat wavelength, naughty, surprising, and deeply tender in its vision of lost souls wounded by love, yet still reaching out for human connection. So that's part of the soul of this film. This is a film that's so full of soul and feeling, and of course desire and romance. It's a very sultry type of a film that you just want to just get soaked in the atmosphere of it to an extent. But it's a very soothing, sultry film is the best way to describe Choose Me from Alan Rudolph. Now, let me get into these characters here, starting with Geneviève Bujold as Dr. Nancy Love. Of course, the performances in this film are really essential to the magic of this film that really make the atmosphere come to life at the next level. You have Geneviève Bujold. She plays Nancy Love. She's a late night radio talk show host who gives advice on love but struggles to follow it herself. So she struggles to find the success that she's trying to lead others to achieve. And then, of course, you have Keith Carradine, who is the mysterious Mickey. He's a charming drifter who has a shadowy past, whose arrival shakes up the lives of the women that he meets. And then you have Lesley Ann Warren, who really steals the show as Eve. She's a former call girl who now owns a glamorous bar, but still seems trapped in her old ways. And these three characters together, whether it's Geneviève Bujold's Dr. Nancy Love, who ends up being a roommate of Lesley Ann Warren's Eve, or Keith Carradine's Mickey, their interactions with one another is the heart and soul of this film. There are some really deep and intense scenes between Keith Carradine's Mickey and Lesley Ann Warren's Eve that are very powerful in this movie in terms of dealing with human desire and what have you. And it's just fascinating stuff. This here is Eve's Lounge, which was a big part of the electric atmosphere and of this entire film, or one of the early shots of this film with Mickey's arrival really is a big part of, I think, expressing what the picture quality of this film is on 4K Ultra HD, because I feel like this is a really strong transfer overall in the sense of when you see like these night scenes, you see that contrast, and you see like a lot of the detail in the shadows. There's a lot of depth and clarity even in those dark scenes. So you see Keith Carradine's character come from the background, walking up into the foreground, and you see the detail and the definition of his character, even in those dark scenes, is just fantastic. Once I saw that scene and saw how beautiful this film looked in those darker scenes and everything being well defined and seeing a lot of details, even in those darker areas, I was like, I knew I was in good shape in this film. And overall, this film is it looks very beautiful on 4K Ultra HD. And I think the Dolby Vision really helps to add some nice contrast and really opens up that dynamic range even more. And I think it really adds a little bit more depth and punch to the colors. The detail is really strong, and I just think it looks good all the way around. So I went ahead and just jumped to the picture quality. It looks really good on 4K Ultra HD, and I think the sound also comes across really well. It is a uncompressed monaural soundtrack, and it sounds really good. One thing that I will say though, and I did read this before I came on here because some of you may have a comment about this, but under About the Master, it says that Choose Me is presented in the original aspect ratio of 1.85 to 1, supervised by director Alan Rudolph and producer David Blocker. This new 4K restoration was created from the 35 millimeter original camera negative. The original monaural soundtrack was remastered from the 35 millimeter DME magnetic track. Okay, I got myself confused because I thought the DME magnetic track was referring to the video part, and that's not the case. It's actually the audio part. So Excuse me, I just corrected myself. So this feature is presented in Dolby Vision HDR, high dynamic range, in the 4K Ultra HD disc and high definition SDR on the Blu-ray. Now, I have not watched the Blu-ray copy, but the 4K looks really good. There's some great contrast, detail, definition. I think it handles the dark scenes really well, as I said before, and it's just a beautifully restored, like 40-year-old plus movie on 4K Ultra HD. I love it when they're able to go back to the original camera negative, the OCN, and do the restoration based upon that. It's really interesting that in a lot of film restorations, they may not even have the original negative and they're still able to use other elements to come up with a really nice picture. But when you can have the original camera negative and it's in good enough condition to use, that's going to be the best source. And you're seeing some great results out of it in films like Choose Me, Night Moves, the Performance, other ones that I've reviewed recently. And in many cases, Criterion and Arrow, they just continue to do a great job with these transfers. And my message is just keep up the good work. So that's great. Great stuff. But yeah, Eve's Lounge has an electric atmosphere for romance. And it's just such a beautiful aspect of this film. A lot of action in terms of dialogue takes place in this lounge between Keith Carradine, Lesley Ann Warren, Ray Don Chong, John Larroquette as the bartender. A lot of romance and lustful conversations happening. So interesting stuff. Of course, you have Ray Don Chong. She is Pearl Antoine and Patrick Bouchot as Zach Antoine. So Ray Don Chong's character is married to this character, and there's a bit of a complication there with Lesley Ann Warren's Eve character going on that I won't go into detail, but that's part of the dynamic of this film that is very interesting. So definitely keep that in mind. So the characters in this film are really interesting in terms of their relationships to one another, how their lives kind of get intertwined together, and how they work through the complexities of just navigating love and relationships, and just how difficult it can be to navigate love. Now, let's talk a little bit about the special features. I think the special features on this edition are very, very strong. They're not incredibly plentiful, but they're very, very good. Starting with this sit-down interview between director Alan Rudolph and actor Keith Carradine that was filmed in 2024. That's very good because you have director Alan Rudolph sitting down with Keith Carradine, and they have such a great relationship, long-term relationship with each other, in the sense of having worked together on so many films. And they talk a lot about how Alan Rudolph talks a lot about his admiration of Keith Carradine's approach to acting, and that he's not your traditional method actor, but he has his own little approach. And Keith Carradine talks about how he views method actors like Daniel Day-Lewis and really admires what they do, but his approach is a little bit different. And they talk about Rudolph's filmmaking style and what it's like working with him. And given that they worked on so many films together, 6 films together, there was a lot to sort of talk about in that sit-down interview, which I thought was very, very good and a great inclusion on this Criterion Blu-ray. Now, the special features are included on the Blu-ray. The film only includes the movie. So you have the movie on the 4K Ultra HD disc just has the movie. The Blu-ray has the movie and the special features. So just keep that in mind. And that is one of the features on there, which is a new conversation between Rudolph and actor Keith Carradine. You also have a new program featuring interviews with Rudolph, producer Carolyn Pfeiffer, blocker, and production designer Stephen Legler, which is very good. And then you have excerpts from an interview with Rudolph at the Midnight Sun Film Festival, which goes over an hour, which is also very good. And then, of course, you have those 3 main features on the disc, along with I don't think they had a trailer on here. I don't think they had a trailer. But you do have a very nice a very nice essay from Beatrice Loaiza called What We Talk About When We Talk About Love. that is very, very good. That goes into Alan Rudolph's filmmaking background, that goes into the production of Choose Me, that talks about the inspiration of the Teddy Pendergrass song and how basically Alan Rudolph sat down and he wrote the script for this film in just over a week, between 1 to 2 weeks, and he filmed this movie and shot it in 3 weeks. So it was just classic independent cinema at its best, and he was able to do it with about a budget of $640,000. So very, very impressive stuff. So she talks a lot about Alan Rudolph's background, his being mentored by Robert Altman, and just the whole production of this film here, which is very good. You can see here the wonderful pictures included on this insert. And if you fold it out, you can see all of these nice pictures here. Very nice. You see John Larroquette, the bartender in here. Just some good stuff. You see Keith Carradine there, kind of a drifter walking around. But yeah, good stuff. Overall, this is a really good movie. It's one of those things where I walked away feeling like, oh, that was okay. I can't say that I just absolutely was in love with this film, but I do think this is a film that I can appreciate. I can appreciate learning more about this director. And I do appreciate the overall atmosphere of this film and the inspiration from the Teddy Pendergrass song. I think the soundtrack is just wonderful. Just some beautiful, nice, sultry soul music, which is trademark Teddy Pendergrass. And so I really like that tie-in with this movie. And I think the characters are very, very good. I do think that upon future rewatchings of this film, it'll probably grow on me more. I don't dislike the film. I like the movie. I'm just not like completely in love with it yet. But over time, I think it'll grow on me even more. But yeah, that's where I'll leave it. I really enjoyed this edition from Criterion. It is a solid film. It is a beautiful presentation of 4K Ultra HD, and the supplements gives you a lot more context into the director and the filmmaker, and just his relationship with the acting talent, Keith Carradine. That sit-down interview between him and Alan Rudolph was very informative, and I really enjoyed that. And so definitely think this is a solid release. This is one I can definitely recommend for the upcoming sale in July, 50% off if you're interested in titles like this. If what I've described here is of interest to you, definitely consider picking it off. Definitely consider picking it up in the next 50% off sale. So let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about Choose Me? Have you seen it? If so, what do you think about it? Have you seen other titles from director Alan Rudolph? And have you seen any other films starring Geneviève Bujold, Keith Carradine, or Lesley Warren? If so, what are some of your favorite films starring those stars as well as Rae Dawn Chong? Let me know all that goodness in the comment section below. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time at the movies. Have a great one. Peace.